Moderadamente no tan tarde para hacer un evento dominicano. Sí. También les quiero avisar que para los que quieran hay habichuelas con dulce allí cuando tengan un momentito libre. Yo soy Renata Pumarol. Soy la coordinadora de Relaciones Internacionales aquí en The People's Forum o el Foro del Pueblo. Nosotros somos un espacio educativo y cultural para la clase trabajadora y las comunidades marginalizadas, con el objetivo de forjar la nueva generación de luchadores y luchadoras del mundo. Estamos aquí para un evento que para mí es muy especial. Estamos conmemorando lo que es la Revolución de Abril en República Dominicana. Fue un hecho histórico en que mujeres y hombres dominicanas se alzaron en armas en defensa de la democracia, en defensa de una constitución y los derechos sociales que representaba esa constitución. También exactamente un día como hoy, un 28 de abril, hace 54 años, fue la invasión norteamericana durante este contexto histórico también, donde en su máxima expresión llegaron 42,000 marines estadounidenses a República Dominicana a pagar esta revolución de abril. Al salir de este espacio, esperamos que cada uno de ustedes salga sabiendo que la Revolución de Abril no fue solamente Camaño, sino también fue mujeres que tomaron armas para luchar por su pueblo. Fue también la lucha de internacionalistas, como lo fue, que combatieron en la Guerra de Abril, como lo fue el italiano Ilio Capocci, el francés André de la Rivière, y los combatientes haitianos Jean Satour, René Baptiste, y a quien hoy hacemos homenaje, Jacques Viau. Jacques Viau fue un poeta y combatiente haitiano-dominicano. Les invito a leer el decreto de Camaño, está pegado allí, declarando a Jacques Viau como dominicano durante la Revolución de Abril por su lucha por la soberanía en República Dominicana. Y Jacques Viau murió luchando en abril en 1965 y hoy hacemos homenaje a él. Les quiero leer un pequeño fragmento de un poema de Jacques Viau llamado Estoy tratando de hablaros de mi patria. Estoy tratando de hablaros de mi patria, aquella que comienza a deslizarse allá donde crecen las guasábaras, las cayenas frágiles, los cántaros sedientos y polvorientos, la hierba rara y amarillenta. Solitaria lanza midiendo el corazón de mi isla. Estoy tratando de hablaros de mi patria, desde aquí, desde mi guarida salina, desde Santo Domingo. Quizás os hable de ambas. Son dos terrones complementarios, puntos cardinales de mi tristeza, caídos de la rosa de los vientos, como amantes cuyo abrazo se rompiera. Estoy tratando de hablaros de mi patria, de su prole de montes y altibajos, de planicies soñolientas, donde a mucho parieron ríos, muchedumbre de cristales, apiñados en las hondonadas. Allí los muertos se hacen peces hermosos, algas extensas, musgo silencioso, o acantilado de rumores que la noche protege. He querido hablaros de mi patria, de mis dos patrias, de mi isla, que a mucho dividieron los hombres, allí donde se aparearon para crear un río. Muchas gracias. Con esto le doy la bienvenida. Gracias. Y ya que este es un evento internacionalista, queremos invitarlos a dar un apoyo al paro nacional que está pasando ahora en Colombia, donde tenemos trabajadores luchando porque hasta el día de hoy, en este año, se han matado a 600 luchadores y organizadores sindicales. Así que les invito, antes de comenzar el evento, a que nos tiremos una foto con este signo en solidaridad con el paro colombiano. Así que si algunos de ustedes podrían acompañarme. Le invito también a los participantes.
No actúen como que los selfies no les gustan. Así que yo espero que ustedes sean lo suficientemente internacionalistas para pararse aquí y decir que ya basta a las muertes en Colombia. Sí. Así que al que le gusta el selfie, venga para acá. Y eso tendría que ser a la mayoría de ustedes. Así que estamos aquí en solidaridad con el pueblo. Yo creo que si nos paramos más hacia el medio, puede ser mejor para que puedan tomar la foto. Gracias a quienes afirmaron que les gustan los selfies. Gracias. Que viva Colombia. Colombia libre y soberana, antiimperialista. Que viva Colombia. Bueno, de nuevo, muchas gracias Renata por la introducción, por el poema. Yo creo que para quienes estamos aquí forjando este proyecto del Foro del Pueblo es importante resaltar que la Revolución de Abril fue una gesta, una jornada, un proyecto revolucionario antiimperialista, que fue un proyecto patriota y, por ende, internacionalista. Hablábamos anteriormente de la diferencia de lo que es ser internacionalista y ser patriótico, a ser nacionalista y ser élite. Y queríamos hacer esa diferencia. Y por eso, en el día de hoy, queremos homenajear a nuestro hermano y compañero, camarada, Jacques Viau, un compañero haitiano que tomó armas para la revolución y la defensa por la patria de la República Dominicana. Mi nombre es Claudia de la Cruz y soy una de las personas dentro de un colectivo que creó este espacio. El Foro del Pueblo, The People's Forum, un foro que es sin ningún tipo de apologies, vamos a hablar Spanglish ahora. Somos antiimperialistas, anticapitalistas, antipatriarcales y apostamos por un mundo solidario y un mundo que avanza las luchas de la clase trabajadora. Este es este espacio, bienvenidos sean todos y todas. Y muchas gracias. En este panel nos atrevemos, queremos, buscamos hacer varias cosas. Una es rescatar la memoria histórica de la Revolución de Abril del 65. Muchos y muchos, si vamos a Google, a Wikipedia, ¿verdad? Encontramos que es la guerra civil del 65. Y no se habla de un pueblo que se alzó en contra de una invasión imperialista y por la protección de la democracia dentro de la República Dominicana. Queremos resaltar la importancia de ciertos sectores que se levantaron a través de los comandos, que también es importante. Pero no queremos caer dentro del romanticismo histórico de qué buena fue la Revolución de Abril. Esos hombres y esas mujeres, ya no quedan más de eso. ¿Verdad? Yo he oído eso. Queremos rescatar las lecciones. Queremos invitar al estudio de lo que fue la revolución como un acto importante dentro de lo que es el hoy. ¿Cómo podemos asumirnos todas y todas dentro de un proyecto revolucionario que tiene un legado? Y queremos también entender la Revolución de Abril dentro de un contexto global, dentro de un contexto regional y un contexto nacional. Y para eso tenemos dos personas muy queridas, muy energéticas, muy chulas, Una de ellas es la doctora Sandy Plácido. ¡Ah, bienvenida! Y Sandy Plácido, la doctora, fue o es, yo creo que de cierta forma también sigue siendo organizadora comunitaria. Hizo mucho trabajo en Washington Heights alrededor del tema migratorio. Así que quiero que le demos de nuevo la bienvenida a Sandy, porque no es una académica de la academia, es una académica del pueblo. Y tenemos también que resaltar lo que es el intelecto dentro de nuestro proceso de base, que es importante. Y mi compay, Canchanchan, Matías Bosch, que vino directamente de la República Dominicana y es el presidente de la Fundación Juan Bosch. Y si el nombre no le suena, eso quiere decir que tenemos que estudiar más. ¿Por qué? Porque es el nieto precisamente del presidente, no, pero espérese, no, yo quiero decir eso, del presidente popularmente electo a la República Dominicana, que es precisamente lo que constituye la amenaza a lo que es el imperio de los Estados Unidos, de decir, no queremos otra Cuba. Entonces, eso es parte de la historia. Y aunque a ti no te gusta que yo diga eso, yo lo voy a decir. Así que démosle la bienvenida a Matías Bosch. Y la metodología que vamos a utilizar en el panel es que van a presentar tanto Sandy, en lo que es el contexto histórico, y luego Matías va a continuar en la presentación, y luego vamos a abrir el piso para preguntas, respuestas, conversatoria. ¿Qué le parece? ¿Estamos bien? No se me duerman. Ok. Sandy.
Gracias. Y si se duermen... Gracias a ustedes, a este foro, a los organizadores, a Claudia, que fue la que me invitó. Muchas gracias por invitarme a este evento. Es un honor, es un gran honor. Y a Renata, que ha sido una de las organizadoras principales. Y hay una que fue la que hizo el flyer, que eso está chulísimo. La que todos los que planearon, mira, aquí tienen todo un equipo técnico. No, esto es una maravilla, tienen que seguir viniendo. Y a mí me encanta, entonces estoy muy feliz. Y gracias también, Matías, por venir y hablar con nosotros. Quizá podría ayudar para just to break the ice y el elefante. Sí, ¿sabe? Parte de mi historia es que yo soy nacida y criada aquí en Nueva York y creo que eso es parte de este trabajo de pensar de nuevo esta narrativa histórica. Al yo criarme aquí en una clase obrera, mi padre eran mecánicos, era lo que eran. Imagínate, yendo a esta escuela de aquí, yo no tenía ni idea. ¿Cómo yo llego a entender algo de este evento de abril del 65? Preguntándole a mi papá en escuela secundaria, papá, bueno, yo le decía a Andrés, long story, pero, Andrés, ¿por qué fue que ustedes vinieron para acá? ¿Por qué tú migraste a Nueva York? Mi papá él terminó la escuela secundaria en el 65, en la República. El mismo año de la revolución. Él iba a comenzar la universidad, pero no pudo porque las universidades estaban cerradas. Ahí es que yo comienzo como con 17 años a leer sobre la historia de República Dominicana y digo, wow, pero una cosa increíble, no sabía nada. Y ahí él contándome, él no fue muy involucrado porque su mamá tenía mucho miedo. Era una casa de varón y ella no quería que el papá había muerto y ella estaba muy como ansiosa. Pero sí, él vio, y él siempre, no, yo tenía conocido, amigos, gente que murieron, él lo vio, y por eso no pudo estudiar, y por eso es que entonces comienza el otro proceso de inmigración, que porque no encontramos muchos de nosotros aquí, segunda generación, tratando de capturar y entender esta historia de nuevo. Y yo soy profesora ahora, y yo enseño jóvenes en CUNY, y muchos latinos, dominicanos, y es una cosa bien grande que uno tiene que llegar para la universidad o quizá a graduate school para uno por primera vez aprender esta vaina. ¿Tú sabes? Entonces, ojalá sigan viniendo estas cosas de aquí para que uno vaya educándose. Entonces, rápidamente, yo tenía un PowerPoint, no sé si era, como soy maestra, no me gusta asumir, pero ustedes, vamos a decir, de los que están aquí, ¿quién sabe básicamente el timeline de lo que pasó en la revolución? ¿Quién puede decir, mira, yo tengo un buen entendimiento? Ok, quizá la otra pregunta, ¿quién aquí siente como que no sé mucho? Sé qué pasó en el 65 y sé qué pasó en Santo Domingo. ¿Quién está más en ese equipo? Ok, perfecto. Entonces, vale la pena repasar un poquito esta historia. Entonces, podamos ir a la próxima. Sí, no sé quién es que tiene... Exacto. Yo no soy muy tecnológica. Mira, eso se lo dejo a lo... Entonces, esto es nada más bullet points. Pero como están en inglés, así pueden ir leyendo muy básicamente. Como sabemos, hubo una dictadura horrible, Trujillo, 30 al 61. Se recuerdan, muchos conocen de la hermana Mirabales. Creo que la hermana Mirabales se sabe una cosa muy importante. Ellas fueron parte de un movimiento político. No salen como, unas mariposas que salieron del Cibao. No, eran parte de un movimiento político. Se llamaba 14 de junio. Minerva Mirabal, que fue abogada, que conoció a su esposo, Manolo Tavares Justo, que fue el líder de ese movimiento. Esa gente venían ya desde los 50, desde la universidad, organizando y hablando, y ahí es que comenzando ya en el 59, ese movimiento 14 de junio, tratan de invadir a Santo Domingo para derrocar a Trujillo. Ahí es que sale todo
Santo Domingo to overthrow Trujillo. That's how Manolo Justo was incarcerated, and how you had the Mirabal's sister who was visiting her husband in prison. And that does not mean that that's the beginning of the anti-Trujillo factions. That's not it. But I just want to give you some context beyond knowing about the mariposas. I believe that it's important for you to know that the July 14th movement was a leftist movement that was not only against Trujillo, but that also espoused a political view. Now, in 61, that's when Trujillo was assassinated. So there's a number of things that happened, but Balaguer comes to power. He has this state title, and you can imagine during that time after Trujillo was assassinated, Balaguer was in bed with the capitalists, with the pro-American businessmen. And perhaps you could add some more information here, because this is where we have Juan Bosch, and there's a number of things that happen. And then in December of 1962, we finally have a democratic election where Juan Bosch is elected president, and he won with over 60% of the popular vote, which means that it was a massive, he received massive support, and then from then on in 63 he started his term as president on February 17th of 63. That's when they write a new constitution for a country that has just come out of a very repressive dictatorship. This was a constitution that gave rights, where there was inclusion of some type of agrarian reform. It was a socialist democratic constitution. He had not gone all the way to the left. He was a Marxist Democrat, and it was a huge change. And as you would imagine, people did not like that. It's important for us to know that he had lived in exile for many years, and the party that he ran under, the PRD, was founded in Cuba. And so we need to understand that this was an internationalist fight that goes back a long time ago. That this does not only go back to 65, but these are decades upon decades of political formation in Cuba and elsewhere. And then we have Juan Bosch, who wins the election, but he does not last. He's overthrown in December of 1963. I am sorry, I write a lot, but a piece of irony here is that the guy who comes to power, Donald Reed, that's an eerie coincidence, another Donald. I think later we will make some signs and joke about that, but the person who comes to power after the coup, Donald Reed, comes with a three-part power, and who are these? And I think that the usual suspect. I think when we talk about Latin America, we're talking about the Catholic Church, business people, industrialists, merchants, anti-communist Cuban exiles, Trujillistas, and that's very important for us to understand how the Cuban Revolution happened in '59 and how the people came to Santo understanding. Also, on the other hand, there's people who wanted Bush, and also something that we were talking about is that people did not only want democracy, but they also wanted the constitution, and they wanted Juan Bosch to come back to power, having to elect him again. And for us to understand about this group is not that they were only part of this formal leftist organization, such as the July 14th group. This was just the average person. These were everyday people on the street who didn't have guns. Yes, there were people who went to Russia and China, but yes, it was people who were rising up against capitalism, against their and there were a number of reasons why people came to that conclusion. Interview our community. I would speak to my uncle, who would tell me about how they divided the city, north, south, and the commando groups. And something important for us to understand is how the U.S. troops arrive days later, where you have the Marines who come in, and it's an extremely violent occupation where they killed thousands of people, and that invasion that starts in '65, it lasted for 4 months, and it was a time of terror, but people kept on fighting. So it's something that's important for me as someone who I've talked to both in Santo Domingo and here. That's what we're talking about here. How could we analyze what draws people to say, I can't take it anymore? It was a very organized struggle, and after that, what we see, let's go to the next slide, and that's what I was talking about. Let's go to the next slide. The point being, the most important point being is that this was organized struggle. Some of the women, Vicky Lora, Aniana Vargas, created their own schools, 4 de Abril Academy, where they would train people both politically and academically, and it's very important. I will talk about women short. So there's something else that I want to say about the Caribbean context. So we already know the history of 65. I never realized that. So some of the most important points that I want to talk about, these women that I'm going to speak about, Piqui Lora and Ana Vargas, is we have heard about the participation of a commando group from Haiti that was formed in the barrio, and there was one commando group that was formed by Haitians. And one of the things that Matthias helped me understand is that these were people that were coming out of Duvalier's dictatorship. For example, Jacques Viau, the poet, his family had fled Haiti and had taken up residence in Santo Domingo. So these were Haitian folks who were living in Santo Domingo for a number of reasons, but it's important for us to understand that they were also part of this struggle, and this was very important for them as well. So when it comes to international solidarity, when it comes to Puerto Rico, Cuba, China, Moscow, Russia, and a lot of these people, like I was telling you, they had been working from exile when Trujillo was in power. So Juan Bosch from Cuba, when he gets overthrown, he goes to Puerto Rico. Magali Pineda, one of the women who was involved, she had to study in the University of Puerto Rico because her family was in exile in Puerto Rico. So she went to school in Puerto Rico after she had traveled to Russia. So I believe that from a historical point of view, now we hear a lot of talk about internationalism, but we have to inscribe ourselves as part of this history. We were exchanging ideas with people from all over the world in this anti-imperialist struggle. And also the role of the war, of the Vietnam War, and something for us to understand about 65 is that this was a year that the United States exponentially increased the number of military trips in Vietnam. So by the end of the year, they had over 250,000 troops. And I was reading a historian that was saying that this was a way for the United States to distract the general population, and they would use what was happening in Santo Domingo to distract people from what's happening in Vietnam. And my whole point is that we have to understand all of this. We have to understand this as an anti-imperialist struggle, and the United States had a plan of stealing, and they were working in different parts of the world, doing whatever they wanted, and this is what it's called the Cold War, and this is a time where the world was completely polarized, and the United States was on the side of the capitalists, so it's very important for us to see it from that viewpoint. And also one thing is that around that time, due to the Cold War, the countries were forming a number of organizations, Movimiento No Alineado, Afro-Asian, and La Tricontinental. So it was a global movement that connected countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And again, we have to inscribe Santo Domingo as part of that history. Castro, when he gives a speech in 66 in the Tricontinental Summit, he talks about Santo Domingo. He says in his speech that it's a very, very important movement from the point of view of the internationalist third world movement. And one of the things that I want to emphasizes that we should not forget what happens after the revolution, during the regime, the Balaguer regime, after the U.S. intervention, and after that they hold elections, and who wins? Balaguer. And those 12 years that Balaguer was in power was just terrible. And I know some of you know some of that history. This was a physical, emotional, and political repression. Repression and violence that affected millions and millions of people. So I believe that is part of what we're talking about here, and Matthias will continue, so I will end in 5 minutes. So we get to the point where the people are take up to the streets. How do we reach that point where there is a collective consciousness in society? And what happened is that under Balaguer we had this kind of repression that oftentimes we don't talk about it enough, but it's also about the economic development that was happening around that time. Because Santo Domingo was doing, the government was doing whatever the U.S. wanted, and it would give money to the people, so the middle class would like that, and that's how they were depoliticizing the radicalism. Those are some of my points, and I hope that you learned something that you did not know. And if you could go to the next slide, these are some pictures of some of the women. This is Piqui Lora from Santiago. She was born in the 40s. Can you imagine a 25-year-old woman who had just graduated from university as a lawyer? And even before that, she was part of the July 14th movement. She was deported to France because of her work under Trujillo. And then she left for Cuba, and that's how she receives a political education. And she comes back to Santo Domingo in disguise, underground, and she's very important, and she plays an important role. She teaches classes, and you see how she has her hair and her rifle. And I looked at the picture and I said, she looks beautiful. She said, I cannot get to the revolution looking like this. I need to fix my hair. And it's just a joke. I like to make jokes. But I believe that it is important for me to tell you their biography, because sometimes we talk about history in these grand terms, but for me it's very important to have these very personal individual stories. That's why I started with my dad and with my uncle. When I asked them how did they feel, were they scared? So it's this thing that they need to have this anger and courage, and what kind of things were happening in their country, so that they would decide to take to the streets. And so if we want to understand this historical events, we need to understand what drives people to make those decisions. And we also have Dana Vargas as part of the July 14th movement, and it's very interesting. She is someone who got involved from New York City, who lived in exile in New York City. And where did she go next? She went to China, and she went to China between 63 and between 66 and 68, and what happened in China was that it really influenced her what she saw there, this revolutionary cultural movement, and she was also a leader. And Magali Pineda, I'm sorry I don't have a picture of her, she died just recently. Perhaps you know her because she was a very well-known feminist on the island. She was the founder and she was the wife of one of the leaders of the July 14th movement. And as I was telling you, she was in Puerto Rico. She comes back to Santo Domingo, and she takes part in the struggle. And she had also been to Moscow. And also, to give you more context about the role of women, and these are women who were politically educated for a while. They took up leadership. These weren't just women that were just cooking. They were also theorizing. They were also plotting. And the next slide, if you could go to this link, this is a very good website called Memoria de Abril. There's a number of documents, photographs, and if any of you would like to learn more, you can rush home and you could see a number of pictures, documents, and a section on women, and you could share with others. It's called Memoria de Abril.
Good evening. Thank you very much to be here, and thank you very much to the People's Forum. Thank you for the invitation to Manolo, Claudia, and Renata, who insisted that I come here since last March. She communicated to us. And to all the Dominicans here, everybody that's Dominican, in the multiple forms of being it, thank you for coming here on Sunday that has the people are not in church, but all I said was, that day, but as long as the people come, I will come here and be here with the comrade Sandy. And to be here in an evening in downtown Manhattan, Sunday evening, talking with you all about a theme of this nature, I feel very grateful speaking to you, or listening to you, thinking about what you were saying, and to have it precisely be right here in this place, in this city. I feel very thankful, truly, thankful of all of you. I'm sorry for the translator, and let's see if I can help him in a manner that I express myself. I also think that every Tuesday I'm coming here with Renata to listen and see David Harvey, and it's amazing that I'm sitting here in David Harvey's classroom. All this time I was thinking, the spirit of David Harvey, please come to me, please give me a fragment of your spirit that I can take with me. Sorry, David, but now the stage is mine. They gotta send him a picture so that he knows. On Tuesday, I'll tell David Harvey that we need to take turns. One Tuesday him and one Tuesday me. Right now it's 6:41 p.m. of the 28th of April, at 6:53 of April 28th of 1965, they disembarked the 42,000 U.S. troops for the first time. Within 2 minutes, the invasion of the North Americans began, of the Dominican Republic, that would be disguised as a popular vote in which a minority voted against, and 2 of them abstained and 2 of them voted in favor of the invasion. Invasion of America, supposedly for peace. Some Brazilians, a couple of El Salvadorians, and 42,000 Marines all invaded. For this reason, Raúl Roda, historian of the Cuban history. He called the OEA the Ministry of Colonies, as it was known in Washington. This was not just an occurrence, rhetorical occurrence. This has its true base in history. The international forces have used organisms that are supposed to be for the cooperation of people, for the peace, just to use it as a justification to invade other countries, to impose their laws on other countries, to bomb, to create violence, and to appropriate the richness of the countries. Of course, this invasion had the promise to provide security to the embassies, to the Americans that were living in there, and to take them out of the Dominican Republic, so that these revolutionaries wouldn't harm them, and also provide humanitarian aid to the Dominican Republic. They were very delayed in getting out the North Americans that were there, and the humanitarian aid lasted too long. To me, this recalls things like Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and things of that nature. This is a story lived by Dominican Republic. This isn't part of an axis of evil. This happened in 1965, 54 years ago. And this invasion and this revolution constitutes, and this is what I want to teach with my presence here. I want to say that historical experience is an experience, is itself teaching, a political teaching for Dominicans, for Latin Americans. It is a teaching of history, of how you win a revolution, of how the people organize, how they rise up, how they feel, and of how the world is completely asymmetric, unequal, where the national sovereignty is a tag. It's just a tag in the Charter of the United Nations, and just goes to show that the country that has a political and military domination results in the lawmaker of other countries. In 2017, it was 100 years of the revolution of the Soviet Revolution. In that moment, there was a panel in Bolivia where Pablo Iglesias interrupted. Some of you may know him. Pablo Iglesias said that the Russian Revolution was an example that the political can triumph over the historical. That is to say that there were laws that said what was possible and determined what was possible, but situations such as the Russian Revolution, the capacity of people to organize and mobilize and to activate and to combine, was capable of generating accomplishments that were beyond what was known and what could have been imagined at that time. And at that time there was a blizzard over Manhattan. The Revolution of April of 1965, I would say, in politics and in history, broke the deterministic theories. It's not that history is like that, it's that there is theories of histories that are determinist. it is to say that there is a recipe of history with 2 eggs and a little bit of oil, you will get fried eggs. April in Latin America is an event that breaks with all those theories. How is it possible that such a small country, and a country that comes out of such a chain of tyranny, of occupation, of a tyranny, some academics have called tyranny more perfect than Nazism. How is it possible that something can happen, such as like 1965, that convocated all the solidarity of all the Latin Americans all over the world? The Dominican Republic's people should feel proud that the majority of people, at least in the western part of the world, wrote about, all the newspapers wrote about and provided respect and pride in what was going on there. All the unions, all the students of Latin America expressed support and pride in this revolution. For this dictator, some people thought that wanted to paint it as picturesque and nice, but it wasn't like that. This should really give us Dominicans pride. Note one thing that is notable. Only in one place in Latin America was there one coup d'etat that was neutralized that was reversed, and that only existed in Dominican Republic. In Chile, you can recall the palace of the coin that was bombed and lit up in flames. In 1965, in this tiny country, there was experience where men and women overturned a government that was instated by a coup d'etat. All the palace that was sworn in, and they were able to re-overtake the capital with tanks, with bombs.
Had to surrender in the face of regular troops, and then you had commandos who were organized by the thousands from the barrios, and the national defense had to surrender, and they recovered the national palace. And also in Ciudad Nueva, for anyone who hasn't been to the Dominican Republic, you need to go to Ciudad Nueva, and in that little city you had this gathering that does not compare to nothing seen in the world, where people came and swore in a legitimate government, and that is just amazing, and that should make anyone feel profound pride, because that's a kind of education that the Dominican Republic received that kind of attention, and only against the greatest, with the support of the greatest power that you had the conservative factions that came to power, and only in that way, face to face with the military tanks, with the army, with the Marines, even when they had all that, they could not win against the thousands of soldiers and the local people and the progressive factions in the Dominican Republic. And I would say that I could close this presentation with that alone, because for me that would be enough. That should be enough to remember that date. But I think that it's important to add some analysis as well. And the first thing is that April was not a coincidence. The April movement had been They had been organizing the movement since the coup d'etat in '63, where they were trying to revert to that. The April movement it's a lesson on political education. How much time do I have? I must not have any time left. And when we talk about a coup d'etat, people would say, what's really the difference between Pinochet, Chavez, and the April movement? And I would say, oh dear, you really have to read a little. There are coup d'etats that come from the personal interest of a group of people that want power. But in the history of Latin America, what you see is an elitist group that imposes itself by force to change the political regime and the status quo. But what you saw with the men and women of the April movement was to overthrow a government that came to power through a coup. And what Chavez did in Venezuela was not a coup; it was a rebellion, not led by an elitist group at all. It was part of a political military collective. There are soldiers who are patriots. There is men and women, soldiers who are patriots in our nations. The difference with Pinochet is that was not a coup to protect democracy or to stop people from getting murdered. He led a coup to give its country, its resources to the transnational companies, and he gave the country to right-wing factions that wanted to disappear the left through repression, and that's a fundamental difference that we need to understand. And the April movement is a background to those uprisings in the history of Latin America. So therefore, we cannot look at the history of Latin America from a Puritan point of view that says that violence is evil, when we have been countries that have been bombarded, massacred, and where violence has been part of our history, and where violence has been in many cases, the only tool for liberation, and that has nothing to do with us not wanting peace. We do want peace. So there were several attempts that would not come to fruition, and they were planning on doing this on April 26th, which I cannot expand on here, but this is I will speak about the return of Bosch as president, and the April Constitution was what triggered that, and there were several factions that wanted to leave this tri-party coup government, and there was a military faction that did not feel they were favored by that government, and that was their slogan to call for the return of Bosch, and the return of the Constitution contributed to overthrow this tri-party government and gave it this character of insurrection. And it's extremely important to understand some fundamental ideological positions. First is that the Dominican people were tired of the abuse of power. Second, the Dominican people were tired of the hyper-concentration of wealth. Third, the Dominican people wanted the Trujillista corruption to end, the military corruption, and that of the government as well. But what achieved the unity of a political project was the Bosch presidency and the 60s constitution, and that's why that slogan, you would see those slogans all over the world, and all the neighborhoods in the north, Simón Bolívar, and on the border in Lozama, you would see people taking to the streets and setting up barricades, and they would not consider the militaries that were overthrowing the government in turn, but a movement that had to do with political change. And that's where you could say there is this revolutionary aspect to April comes from. Renata was telling me that she was saying that this movement was been domesticized, and there's people who would describe the April movement as an uprising, a rebellion, or there's people who would say it was only a revolution, or is it both? Or is it both? It's possible that it's both. So Gramsci spoke about war as a movement and war as a political position in countries where the state is repressive and there is very little legitimate institutions, and where there is no consensus channels. And this is the uprising is a way in which masses would change history in America. And this was limited by the abuse of power. What makes this revolutionary? What makes it revolutionary is essentially the fact that you had two historical projects that face each other, which is important for us to understand that there were two projects. A project that advocated for order, that had freedom as its slogan, and equated freedom as that which represented opposition to communism, and this was an oligarchic order which would substitute Trujillo as a head of a status quo that was vertical and unequal in society. And what you had seen in the Dominican Republic, an alternative project that was in the works for many years during pretty much during the 20th century, which would bring to an end corruption and Trujillismo, and who ask for the distribution of power and wealth, and that's what makes it revolutionary, the redistribution of power. And the polls at the time, most people felt that they could not influence the future of the country. I don't know if you would relate to that. So people were asked to put their heads down and take a step back. And that's why the wealth was held by a few, and that's why the Bosch presidency was important in that constitution as well, because we were able to get over Trujillismo, and in the imaginary we could start to think that the country could be governed by certain rules in which all Dominican men and women were equal, and they deserved the same rights and dignity. That was a new element that was introduced that went beyond Trujillismo, and then you had a revolution that, yes, it was violent, that was led at first by the military, but where the people So a possibility that they did not see before, but it is key for us to understand that there was a political fight from 62, as Bush would say. The people will either be spectators or protagonists in their future, their destiny. And the people saw in this call on the radio on April 24th when they make him the person to be in charge, to give a message which he gives and which the people are able to recognize as that message something completely new, which is that we will reorganize the country. We will change and we will set the rules of the game. And we will reinstate the kind of constitution that says that wealth belongs to all Dominicans and that there's no more land-owning families in the country, and that still today in the Dominican Republic would still be revolutionary. And that is precisely why in Latin America, also when it comes to political theory, we are forced to only look at the experience of the European socialism in this dichotomy that calls for either reformation or revolution, which makes people believe that revolution can only happen through violence, and it took for us to get to the 21st century and see what happens in South America, for us to realize that there is an electoral approach in which the people could make their voices heard, and that the essence of revolution is not about how you take power, but the nucleus, the substance of a revolutionary movement is whether or not the wealth and power is still being concentrated in the hands of a few, and in the political character of the movement, of whether or not
el pueblo dominicano hay que entender, después de la muerte de Trujillo, la campaña del 62, la presidencia del 63, la crisis en la que el Trujillito hunde al país, desarrolla el proceso sin el cual es imposible entender,
which is impossible to understand in 1965.
Y a la vez hay que.
And at the same time, you have to understand something that is very profound, and I'm almost done. You have to understand how it's possible that the people was incorporated, that was owned by a political elite. Nothing that was done by the political elite has that characteristic. A lot of the commandos that were composed of what was called in the Dominican Republic called tigueraje. Inclusively on the left they were called a lumpen proletariat. A population that was mostly illiterate, that was mostly unemployed, what's called chiripera, or with unofficial jobs. These were the people that were involved in the struggle during that month, and they were facing off against the Dominican soldiers with all their equipment. The process of the revolution in the Dominican Republic is a complex process, and a country like the Dominican Republic, that which is called tigueraje, they are not involved in politics. We shouldn't pretend like elite will change history. Another thing that April teaches us how the neighborhood, our friendships, our charities, and all the people that are lumpen, were facing off against the U.S. Marines, and how they became Spartan soldiers as part of the political construction. Right here, we don't have time to talk about that, but you have to learn that, because in Dominican Republic, and maybe I don't know, but I feel like the majority of our countries, the majority of people that live in our country live in favelas, live in slums, and if it wasn't for them, then who will construct the political change, processes of change? Finally. And there are very interesting studies that show that it's not only those that fight and struggle, but there's all the base of food, of accompaniment, of treating the sick, of giving housing, of providing water, of hiding. All of that was a network that was very incredible. Comrade, I tell you, it was in May, June, July, August. How many months were people struggling? That didn't just happen alone. That was an entire network of people that were building. That is politics. That is politics. Politics is not going out with a program. It's not going out with a flag. It's not going out with a leader that says, follow me. It's building those forces composed by the students of the university, composed of middle-class white folks, and composed of lumpen. For the women, for the Haitians. And finally, in closing, you cannot understand that the 3rd of September, when they exchanged the presidency, that came provisional government, and later came the 12 years of dictatorship by Banaguera, and basically none of the reivindications earlier occurred after that. We did not succeed in bringing back Bosch. We did not bring back Bormann. And nothing was able to be succeeded. Only a pact in the Dominican Republic that said that there would be elections and that there would be persecution. And that was not accomplished either. The dictatorship remained for 12 years, the human rights violations, the disappearances, the assassinations, the violence, the displacement did not, the fight against those things did not succeed, but the U.S. had all those things as goals, but they did not realize that. They only sent bombs, and then they sent violence. You guys will not be like Cuba. You guys have to let democracy back into the country so that you will not become like Cuba. In one moment, a colonel comes through and says, as a boss, and Azules Bernal asks for the United States, asked the United States to invade at 6:53 p.m. on April 28th. So think about Syria, think about Libya, think about the freedom fighters. The people that were fighting for liberty in the Dominican Republic were communists that needed to be ended just because they were bringing back a second Cuba. The freedom fighters in Cuba, in Libya, they were freedom fighters. They were rebels, patriots, internationalists, Democrats. In Dominican Republic, they were communists that needed to be ended because they only wanted to assassinate people. And now, lastly, the Gold Nation building did not succeed there. And now I end. Later came the nation building. This we have to examine for real. And we have to get all those people, all the people that need to be there. We need to create a government that needs to be there for as many years that will create that which happened in 1978.
Lo que en Chile y en otros países,
In 1978,
lo que se llama
what happened in 1978 was that what happened in Chile and other countries,
las democracias transadas,
and what is known as the scam democracy, the famous transitions to democracy that are nothing more than pacts, that here you can do everything except that which we've created. And we've created a society where antagonism, where the antagonism of redistribution of wealth and redistribution of money can occur. And those who have power, that have political power, is defined on a tablet, but and that has no more discussion. And that's what continues today in Dominican Republic. We talked about this before. The relation with the present. What society do we have? The people are tired of corruption. Think about those causes that I told you that happened in 1965. People are tired of corruption. People are tired of the accumulation of wealth in the hands of the few. And the business class that 70% of the population in the Dominican Republic says that the rich have too much. People are tired of the violation of their rights, and what happens? Why won't there be another April? We have to think about the level of depoliticization that has occurred in the Dominican Republic. Where is the experience? Where is the continuing trends that exist from '63? You have a pauper population that did not have anything to eat. You have what? You have food stamps. How do you make people understand that they have a problem solved? Between Dominicans, children of Dominicans, and all the Dominicans that live outside of the Dominican Republic that send thousands of dollars of remittances. And now you think about what the pressure cooker of a society we have if those remittances did not exist. I'm telling you that that we should take out the people that take away the people that do not want to live there and that send money back, and that will be a bad situation. 14 people of the population believes that you can trust other people. That was not the situation in April. If the people in the neighborhood in April did not have that trust of each other, the fraternity to say, let's go over there, only 15% of people now have trust of other people. Now, how will you continue? 49% of people want to leave the country and have now planned to leave the country. And how will they plan to leave the country? Under those subjective conditions, you have the concentration of power, the concentration of wealth. To me, it seems that we have intervened. There has been a very sophisticated intervention of how the Dominican people suffer, even especially with the credit card debt. A majority of Dominicans spend their money on paying back credit card debt. The debt becomes a cushion to the antipathy against the revolution. What became to me the possibility to transform personal indignation in collective will, and that collective will of change in practice and in exercise will take over power.
La experiencia política más formidable que ha habido
The most formidable political experience since 1900s in Dominican Republic, and I'm convinced that if Dominican Republic were a more well-known country in the global stage, we would have 800,000 doctoral theses on this revolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Matthias. We will start our dialogue. Renata will be our mic woman. So if you could please raise your hands, we will take questions, comments in groups of 3. So the first 3. No worries, Matthias. Matthias is thanking you for your time. Renata, who has a question or a comment?
Gracias por excelente panel.
Thank you for such an excellent panel. I am Puerto Rican and the majority of my students are Dominican, and my responsibility in this country is to learn from history and empower them. So there's 2 million. I don't get to teach all of them, but at least there's a number of them that I teach every day, in which I can teach them their history and speak on this. And I also wanted to talk about the relationship of Bosch in Puerto Rico. He went to Puerto Rico twice. We know of him in Puerto Rico. We know of him in the universities, and we really value the pedagogical and solidarity work that he did in Puerto Rico. And that was my only comment, so thank you. Hi. Good afternoon. My Spanish is not great, but I will try. So I've had conversations with Brazilians, people from the U.S., and Dominicans, and I see so many similarities in those experiences and how these revolutions come about, and also what you mentioned as well briefly, which is how we keep people complacent with food stamps and social services, where they give them the least of things, what I call crumbs. And what I see is what I see among my friends is that there is a worry, and I see that they do not know how to channel that. What I would say is that if the internet would stop working, there would be a revolution, because it's a great distraction. I see it as a distraction. And one of the things I see is that people are always looking at a screen, and I think it is important for us to continue talking about this history, where often this history is not told in a clear way, which I never took a course in Dominican history until much later. And when I finished that course, my mind was blown away, and I was radicalized, because these were things that I didn't know. And our professor also told us that all the revolutions that were held in the Dominican Revolution were also led by young people, and they would not let the young people do that. They keep them distracted, and they give them crumbs. And I also think it is important for us to form community with African Americans here, with Brazilians, because what is happening in Venezuela is exactly the same thing. So I love this conversation, and thank you for coming here and speaking to us. And I would like to see a way for us to continue this conversation, so that we could see that this is something that is happening in all of our communities, and that we should be informed on these things.
Hello, ¿me pueden ver? Hola a todos, yo soy Amanda.
Hello everyone, my name is Amanda.
Habían comentado antes que sería chulo si habláramos no de...
I said before that it would be nice if we could speak about some of the stories that we have from our families, and there's a number of stories from my family, and I would like to talk about the depoliticization of the Dominican people. So, for example, when I started to learn more about communism, once I mentioned that to my dad, and he said, yeah, I was once a Marxist and a communist, where he would say that during Balaguer he would come out to the streets and throw stones, and I thought that was very interesting to say, wow, that's my legacy. But I was also upset with him, and I said, come on, why is it that you never told me this? And in the meantime, there's a side of my family that was Balaguerista, who would always talk about it with pride. He would say he would come and give us food and all that. And that's how they keep the... And so I was wondering if you could talk more about Balaguer. And I'm not really sure why I'm so nervous. I'm a performer. For me, it's interesting that we talk about Trujillo so much over here to the point that we romanticize it, but we don't talk about Balaguer. And Balaguer just happened. When I was born in 1990, Balaguer was still president, I believe, still that year. So I wonder if you could talk about that. Well, Amanda, I identify completely with you. It's true, she's a performer, she's a journalist, she's a writer, and I identify myself with that, and I think that the future avenues of research, for example, would be the fact that in the 70s you had a growing population of Dominicans in the U.S. who, for example, how did they see Balaguer from here? What was their opinion? That was the history of my father, who was here in the 70s, and they would travel to Santo Domingo, and I would imagine the people who would travel to bring remittances and food. And I think that part of that process and history is the same thing in my family. I was interviewing my uncles last week to get ready, and my aunt would come out and she would say, "Put that aside. Let's all eat." And I don't know if this is something that's psychological because of the trauma, or because they look at young people talking about these issues, and that reminds them of their friends who were killed. And I don't know if there's trauma there, but we need to gather those histories, because you never knew that this was going on. It just feels that, how is it possible that we never knew about this? So I really identify myself with what you said. Look, Amanda, it seems to me that those kinds of questions, I would like for us to respond collectively, including, and I also see people who are from different generations, and also those who are not Dominicans or do not have a relationship with the Dominican Republic. I'm sure you have a point of view, because this has also happened in many countries, including Spain, Italy, and France, in many countries, and also perhaps in the United States. And we have all these different generations. And also thinking about those that arrived here, who were parents and their children. And for me, it would be great if I could just sit back and listen and learn a lot, because all that we have are just hypotheses. And two things that I would like to highlight. The April movement is not a revolutionary movement, because everyone who participated was from the left. As a matter of fact, the three organizations that we could say were technically from the left were in fact very small in terms of their activity. The April movement was revolutionary because the same reason why we call revolutions revolutions, because they're capable of gathering a critical mass of people, a significant number of people, beyond strict ways of identification, in the ways that they politicized pain, politicized indignation, politicized suffering, and they were able to gather, to polarize that and to modify and turn upside down the rules of the game and the status quo, and that will happen in the Dominican Republic. So the question is, what could have happened? And now we know that we could have achieved that because we could have done a great thing. And as a matter of fact, we did. Let's not forget that on April 25th, we took over the palace. Now, when it comes to Balaguer, it's not because I want to argue against that, it's because I want to kind of provoke with these questions and answers. I like to think of Balaguer. For those of you who don't know Balaguer, you could look him up, because we might be assuming that all of you know all these names, and perhaps some of you don't. Balaguer, who was president, who becomes a puppet president after Trujillo, and you have the Yankees who bring him to New York, and then they bring him back to the Dominican Republic in '68, and they propped him up. He never won an election. For me, it's interesting to not only think about Balaguer, for me to think from 76 to 76 to 96 is not just about the fact that Balaguer was governing, but also the political institutional forces that could govern the country made a pact with him. What I mean is that the political process after the April Revolution was a process of making deals and having impunity, and where the rules of the game were never changed. And the first thing that you have there in the Dominican population, and this is a conclusion, I would ask that you look up the Latino Barometro, which is a poll, which is very interesting. In the Dominican Republic, there was a sense of disappointment that took over, that was great, and it was as serious as Balaguerismo or Trujillismo. And the idea that you were a fraud. And of course, this was not mechanical. There was infiltration, there was cooptation, there were people who were captured, there was a series of processes, murders, forced disappearances of the leadership that could substitute, including Camaño itself, himself, the president of the republic, that signed the decree, who was kidnapped and assassinated, and that was led by the CIA. Oh my God! So there was that whole process, but they are all the same. All of them at the end will make a pact. All of them will steal. And there is a great level of cynicism, and then there is this thing about neoliberal culture and individualism. There's this expression that I heard the other day, this idea of the tigueraje that people use in Congress, people of all the parties, that say this saying, those who try to take up too much, when you try to hold on many things on your plate, they will fall. And what they say, those who try to grab too much, they will for sure grab something. You understand? And it's as a process of lumpenizing the political process, and this idea that each one should look after their own interests, that everyone is paying off their credit cards, everyone is trying to pay for their car, everyone is trying to pay for their apartment. No one knows where money comes from. For example, if you go to Santo Domingo today, and pretty much the entire city is a city where apartments cost $6,000 or more. I study the salaries in the Dominican Republic, and there is a percentage, a great number of people who don't earn enough, and you have no idea how they pay for apartments. There's money that comes from drugs, there's money laundering, there is corruption, and I'm not saying this because I'm trying to judge people morally. I'm saying this because we gotta add that to the equation, and we should say, how is it that you have a population that so how the opposition to Balaguer came to power to profit off that? And how could you, with this neoliberal morality and also this has to do with the fact that in the Dominican Republic you go to the few libraries that exist there, and the majority of books are about our Paulo Coelho books or individual success. And the question for me is how when we go to the tenant meetings, I go to the barrios, and the majority of tenant associations are tools of the political parties. These are not organizations of the neighborhood. These are places where there is someone who leads that to then go to climb up the political ladder and enter Congress. And I'm asking you, how could you build a political movement through that? And of course, there has been a weapon of mass destruction that has contributed to the depolitization, because if I can solve my personal problems, I do not have to be involved in politics.
Take 3 more questions, and then we will close so that there's a way that you can interchange with the people. Well, thank you very much. My name is Jeffrey. My first question is for Bosch. What is the big difference between 1965, the generation of 1965, and the generation now, when in this moment we see that, and I'm going to say in English, tenemos tanta información en nuestro dedo. I'm going to tell you what one of my grandparents said, that we have so much information and the young people won't do anything to make the change that is necessary in the Dominican Republic. My grandpa died saying that in Dominican Republic there are no more men. The men that were left were killed by Trujillo and then by Balaguer. But there's also women. We're going to take 2 more questions. This side's kind of quiet. Good evening, my name is Yalitza, and my question is what do you think about the conversation that the Day of Independence in Dominican Republic should be in February and not in April?
Esto va a ser un poco polémico, maybe, pero
this is going to be kind of polemic.
No, es sobre el rol de la iglesia.
It's sobre el rol de la I'm sorry, it's about the role of the church.
La religión a su beneficio, pero también había otro
people use it people use religion for their benefit, but there's also Trujillistas that looked at Oscar Romero. But religion is very important in Dominican identity, and I'm not even Catholic or anything, but you know, this is just my question. I can say one thing about that. One thing that I also want to mention in this topic of the depoliticization, we have to practice to see how we will pronounce that. But look, this is the example of the women that I gave. If you see it in those years after the revolution, where do they go? Anya Vargas becomes a fighter around the issues of the environment, around issues of a company, Falconbridge, that it was a mining company. She struggled a lot against them, and so she and Laura, she worked a lot with displaced workers. Mama Tingo, you're talking about the relationship between religion and struggle. You have her. And so how do you highlight everything? The struggle became, and there are activists that were trying to find the path that occurred after the revolution, especially with the struggles of the workers, of the environment, and especially with feminism. One thing about Ana Tenida is that she was very interested about personal relationships, and that was a lot to do with her pedagogy and how do you construct that sense of community, and that was very important for her. And yes, again, everything very negative, but we want to trace those paths. How do they continue to try and look for ways to do something? And so I just think about that story about the Mother Tingo, and the struggle continues. It's very important what my comrade has just said for me, and it illuminates me. You said an important thing. She gave an important thing. She wants to give me something difficult to deal with. But I understood your signal. But first, in the theme of, on the topic of information, I just forgot the name. I think she's Spanish, but I think she works here. I don't remember in what university. She is giving conferences and writing about that we have to democratize algorithms. That has to do with the question of our comrade back there. Because this thing is telling us what we want to see and what we want to read. And the algorithm. This thing completely works around algorithms. Bolsonaro, who was in Brazil, who went into the campaign, basically didn't use flyers, didn't use anything physical. He won because of WhatsApp. He won because of social networks, particularly WhatsApp. I get information that's been curated for me, and now the algorithm will continue to reproduce that curated information. I will not be introduced to a different point of view that's different than mine. It's extremely difficult to be exposed to a different point of view. Possibly we're more disinformed than ever before. Possibly because I'm not informing myself or dialoguing with people that are different than me, or who are my rivals, or who are people that walking next to me, to figure stuff out, or even the person that's sick next to me, I'm not speaking to them, and they take 10 hours to see me because everything is right here. Everybody is completely occupied by the phone. All the information here is predetermined. This is a topic of today, a current topic, and it's a battle. And if the progressive sectors don't realize the terrain of this battle, we're not going to. The elections will never be won. The people that are progressives. We are underestimating the value of social networks or we are overestimating the value of social networks to give information. And we need to evaluate the massive project that is undergoing with this. Just like I support natural hair, there are 800,000 followers that support natural hair, and I don't know that there were 1 million people organizing themselves to make a Bolsonaro president. Just because I see 800,000 people supporting natural hair, I never learn about the other side. This is a terrain of battle that I'm just going to leave right here because you already know. But that's where the battles are being fought. How can the progressive forces, the critical forces, the social justice forces, how can they do politics there? Now going to February 27th, I think it's a very important day. But of course, the Dominican right and the Dominican people are interested in the February 27th, but only in the most ignorant and stupid version of this. February 27th is very interesting, but they're not interested in it. They're only, it's not just that they know a date, it's that they know a cartoon. The Dominican people don't know what happened in February 20th, and I've proved it as a professor. In schools and everything, they don't know what happened. No. We should have the 3 dates. The February 27th, we should have August 16th, and we should have the 24th of April. And it would be beautiful also. One in which we separate ourselves to create a new state. Another one in which the Dominican people overturned the biggest imperial power at that time, which was Spain, and another one which was only comparable to what happened in Cuba at that time. In Cuba, it was a rebel army. In Dominican Republic, it was soldiers, and it was people trained at School of the Americas that also invaded Panama and now invaded Dominican Republic. But the majority of people were from Washington. And now we have Winston Churchill Avenue. Do you believe Winston Churchill had anything to do with us? Lincoln is all right. Lincoln's all right. Because really, Lincoln is an interesting figure, but get out of here with Churchill. The church, just so you see, the revolution also created division in the church. There was a divorce between the class of the church class and the young priests and young nuns. They provided food, the protection, the care, the clinics, and all that covering apparatus that were covering the fighting forces, a lot of those were religious zealots. April also polarized the Catholic Church. And so I want to answer the man that, just like David Harvey says, we think in more Marxist terms. Not to be pedantic, just to. There's a theory about populism, Ernesto Laclau, that are interested. Those who are interested can look it up. There is a political theory that is very popular in Latin America, where populism in Latin America is a way to concatenate differences, but that the political phenomenon is all contingent. That is, it responds to the conjunctures of the times. From a materialist point of view, there is structural problems, and structural problems generally create injustice and abuses of human rights. But the construction of the political, of course, is contingent. And just so that we don't leave with frustration, the question has to be, are there enough men? And I understand that's the Dominican way of saying it. I understand that it's machista, but it's the way of saying it's not to say that that has been lost or that all the people are lost. Let's think about it this way, and I think, and this will help me just make more precise what I want to say. Precisely, the phenomenon like April, the revolution in France, the revolution in America, the civil rights movement, all those processes were precisely the contingencies in which the politicization occurs. People are not doing nothing all the time. The art of politics depends so much on contingency that's given. Where is the indignation? Where is the pain? Where is the abuses that permits me to connect with each other? There were conservatives, there were liberals, there were Catholics, of the right, of the left. Those are all the processes of social change. I only want to note what is notable.
Who has been drinking at night is now shooting a gun, and that is part of politics. So the question is how we as the current Dominican society, with an economy that grows the most in the Caribbean with millions of dollars in remittances, with a number of social programs that give you money and all this giving away of things, how can, with this huge supermarket full of things, and with people that every time there's a holiday they have tickets to Miami, San Juan, or New York, and I don't know where that money comes from. For every holiday they live with their entire family, and I don't know how you could go to Santo Domingo today. You see those avenues and those malls, and you see the kind of cars that you see in Manhattan, and you see those kind of cars in a country that has the highest birth mortality in Latin America, and these people who are blind, who don't even go to the doctor, and you cannot wait for people to to accept that, and it is wrong for people to go preach and wait for change to happen. Change is built, and it is built when you make people want to change. And in the church, you see a faction that is a right-wing faction, and also you see another faction that. And you also see people who are doing well economically, and people who we, for a long time in the West, and our parents and the generation before us, for a while, we fell into looking at labels that would not let us see the whole picture. And politics is less about labels and more about how could we find things in common that could build a fabric that is going to bring about the revolution. What kind of things do we have in common, and what kind of things can we do as artisans to build something? So the vanguard will exist, but the vanguard will not change anything. But without the collective subject, there will be no change. The collective subject has to be built. Well, thank you. Thank you, Sandy, Matthias, and all of you. You gave us homework. In this country, when we talk about this collective subject and the political subject, is something that oftentimes we have to look more of, precisely because here, in the belly of the beast, there is a people that is depoliticized and very, very distracted, and also the thing about natural hair. Man, I'm saying that because when it comes to only speaking on that, because that's how the algorithm works, because we should understand that even though we have a cell phone, not all information is on the internet. Information is when we get information when we exchange ideas, and what they tried to do after the April Revolution with Balaguer, with its repressive state, was to kill the idea, to kill the dream. And I thank you for bringing that here, because we need to give form to these revolutionary ideas, which at the end of the day will bring us to a revolutionary practice. If I might just say, just only for a minute, only because I don't want you, because of what you said about the environment. Today in the Dominican Republic, there is a struggles with great potential, revolutionary potential. The fight to defend water, the fight to recover access to health, the fight for the pension, the fight against anti-racial discrimination. And I just I'm saying that to clarify my point, which is expressed in the fight to use my hair and my body, and the fact that it's my body, which has potential revolutionary in this patriarchal racist context. So there is a number of things on which we can build revolution in the Dominican Republic. I have only named a few, but there is a number of people who have built all of these little things, so we have to build that. And that's what I was trying to say, the collective subject and the political subject, which, how can we make those connections, that there's two kinds of projects, not only in Latin America, but also around the world, which is a neoliberal capitalist project and a project for social progress for the poor, which are two different projects. And we have to define in what on what side of those two projects we will build those networks. And that's extremely important because even within those movements, we have those two projects that are making strides. The interests of the elite and those of the dispossessed, of the men and women of the world. And I also want to highlight this anti-imperialist movement that is happening in Latin America, which is very similar in the sense of a president that has self-proclaimed as president with a threat of a military invasion, which is the anti-imperialist struggle in Venezuela. And since we are here trying to reclaim the historical legacy of the Dominican Republic in the historical context, in the revolutionary context, we have this historical task to support the Bolivarian revolution in Venezuela. And if we're not able to make these connections, we need to look into what do we mean by revolution. Thank you very much for being here. We will open up the space for everyone to share and to build, and I am so happy to be here with my friends, and I hope that you follow them on social media. There's many educational activities. Again, thank you.